Here this morning. Amen. There's one who gave us order, and that's the Almighty. And if there's a world to wake up in, it's because He sustains it. And if he was not there, there would be no world, there'd be no creation. Father, I pray that you'd give me the gift of teaching this morning. I pray that you'd help me now as we open the Scripture. In thy name we pray. Amen. All right, now this morning I'm going to do something. I'm going to approach what we're talking about from a little different perspective. All of you are aware that just a few days ago we recognized the 14th anniversary of the murder of 3,000 people in New York City. They call it 9/11, and any American should be fully aware of what happened there. What I'm going to do today is to try to show you how that a lot of things are dovetailing, coming together into a noticeable pattern. For example, just the other day, a Catholic group, and you know the Catholics have been strong against abortion, where a lot of independent Baptists have been mum when it comes to the issue of abortion. Many of the Roman Catholics have been standing staunchly against the murder of the unborn children. In any event, they had a flyer made up that they wanted to get printed so they could hand it out and organize, an effort to at least to make people aware of what's going on. So they took it to Office Depot. And they took it to Office Depot to get the flyer made. And the workers at Office Depot sent it back to them and said, "We're not going to do this. This is hate speech." Now just digest that for a minute. Think about it for a minute now. Think. So they said it's hate speech. And they contacted the management, and they agreed with the workers there and said, "Yeah, this is hate speech. We're not going to do this." And of course, you can get into the issue of whether or not what the Catholic Church is doing about abortion, and they're not the only ones, of course, but what they're saying about the killing, the murder of 70 million unborn babies in this country. You can call it hate speech if you please, but here's the point. The mainstream media hasn't said a word about that. And this is a business that has refused to service a legitimate customer because they call it hate speech. Now, on the other hand, when this clerk up here in Kentucky refused to issue a marriage license to sodomites, then she, of course, comes under the scrutiny and the guns of all the mainstream media in the country and the world. Do you see a double standard? That's what you need to look for. You need to look for that double standard because your Christian faith is being systematically undermined. I'm responsible, folks. If I'm gone out of this world tonight, your blood won't be on my hands. I'm telling you. There is a systematic effort in this nation to eradicate Christianity. They're driving it inside the four walls of the church houses. But that's for the time being. They don't want your voice in public. They don't want you anywhere in the secular arena in this nation. They want shed of you. And if they can keep you inside the four walls of the building, then for the time being, they'll be happy. And I don't think the timing for them is right now because there are still millions, hopefully, of Christians in America. Yeah. And if you ever did wake up this so-called sleeping giant, you might get something done. And they're very careful in what they do. They don't want to do something that's going to cause widespread alarm among the sheeple. They want to make sure that people are, they just continue on in their sleep and aren't, and the pastors, of course, I don't know if you monitor very many of them, see what they're saying. Most of them spend all their time, the Sermon on the Mount, say, be good, that you need to be good to him, you need to be good to her, and you need to be good to them. And then when you go home, be good to this one, and everybody be good to everybody. And that's the Bible. That's all 66 books, everything in the Bible. It's all about you be good to him and he'll be good to you. Now let's go home. That's all some people hear. And now if I don't tell you this, You're not going to get it from CBS, NBC, and ABC. You're not going to get it from WATE, WBIR, and what's that other one, WVLR, whatever it is. You're not going to get it from them. You're not going to get it. And it's the responsibility of the church to preach and teach the truth. We are the pillar and ground of the truth. So the reason I say that is because 9/11 is a watershed event in this country. I witnessed it. I watched the television screen when that jet flew into that Second World Trade Center tower. I watched it, real time. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was so shocking, and I remember my reaction. Did I really see this? Yeah. That's exactly how I felt. What am I looking at? It took it a while for the magnitude of what I had just seen to settle in. And then when I watched that tower collapse, it literally blew my mind. Yeah. Now, the reason I bring that up is because what happened in 2001 up there in New York City has a direct bearing on what's happening right now. For example, in Mosul, I think it's in Iraq, Christians have been there for 2,000 years. They've been there for 2,000 years. There are no Christians there now. None. None. They're all gone. There's not a single Christian left in Mosul. Does anybody care? Do any of the reverends in America, you ever heard one of the reverends in this country say anything about the Christians in Mosul being all gone? Butchered? The women raped in front of their husbands? Children carried off? Sold into sex slavery? Made sex slaves? This kind of thing that's going on right now. Not a one left from an ancient Christian witness, a testimony that's been there 2,000 years. They're gone, folks. And that's being repeated all over Iraq and Syria. Right now, tens of thousands of refugees are fleeing into Europe. How many are aware of that? Tens of thousands, folks. They say that this is the largest mass movement of people since World War II. These are refugees. These people are driven from their homes. Now, here's the biggest problem with all this. Probably 90% of them are Muslims. And there's a lot of people over there that's smart enough in Europe to realize that with all of this influx of Muslims into their country, it may very well change what they call the demographics of the nation. And it will change. Because wherever they go, once they begin to dominate, it's their way or the highway. Now, that's a fact, folks. Yes, sir.
They show a few children, but 90% of them are all men.
I know it, yeah. And they're fighting among themselves. I read where the Syrian Muslims fighting the Afghan Muslim. And, that's all they do. That's what they do, folks. That's the reason they're fleeing now. They kill each other. And they're exporting that into this country. This country, I think, is going to take some now. What was the latest figure? 10,000? How many? 10,000. And then plus what's happening, over there in Europe. Yes, sir.
Pastor, I've already heard that the Muslim clergy, they already have a new name for Europe. They now call it, among the Muslims, it's now called Arabia. Arabia.
All right.
Europe, Arab.
Yeah.
Arabia.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two pieces of land on earth, and I can't remember. Harb is war, and there's the other, which is peace. And the land either fits in Harb or it fits in peace. You understand that crane fell in Mecca and just killed a few hundred people. That is the most holy site in Islam, folks. The most holy. Mecca, Medina, and then Jerusalem, in that order. And so this just happened in Mecca. Now, let's talk about Muslims this morning, but I brought this up to show you, try to give you a pretty broad view of what's happening right now. So the bottom line is that when you go back and look at this, you ask yourself this question. Do you suppose when they did that up there in 9/11 that they moved our armies into Iraq, and they took down Saddam Hussein, and then they withdrew that they would create a vacuum, which of course would create this refugee situation, which of course would bring all of these people moving into Europe, which would bring destabilization and all of that. It doesn't take rocket science to know that when you take down a government, something's going to take its place. Something's going to take its place. These people who sing peace and kumbaya, folks, don't know anything about the human heart. The only reason they're not coming onto this shore right now and attacking you with their military force is because we've got a military force. Period. If you do not have the military power to stop them, they'll invade America. Who are they? Any country who wants to come over here and take your resources. They'll do it in a heartbeat. But anyway, when you go back and look at 9/11, you find some anomalies. There's some things going on there that just absolutely beg some questions. And I'm going to give you just a few. I'm certainly no expert on it, but these things have bothered me. But I'm going to give you the major bother of all of it. I firmly believe in my heart of hearts that there's a whole lot more going on than these Saudi Arabian hijackers flying jet aircraft into those twin trade towers and the official government line on what happened. In my heart of hearts, I just don't believe them. And I am joined with millions of other people who see it the same way. Now, here are just a few of them, and I'll cover these quickly. These buildings were built with steel. They're steel-structured buildings. And yet we're told that because the jet fuel was burning, what have you, that it melted the steel and caused these buildings to collapse within themselves. There are over 3,000, now get this, don't take my word for it, over 3,000 structural engineers and architects that absolutely rebuff and refuse that official party line. It takes over 2,700 degrees to melt mild steel. And you don't have anything in your home. If your home burned to the ground right now, it would not melt mild steel. That steel would still be standing when your home was burned to the ground. Because you don't, unless you have a blowtorch in there and an oxyacetylene setup where you can create that kind of temperature, it's not going to do it. Never before nor never since has a steel-structured building collapsed the way these two buildings collapsed up there in New York. And as they collapsed, they were literally turned to powder. You're talking about steel, folks. You're talking about steel thick. I don't know how thick some of those beams were. Enormously thick. And you can burn jet fuel from now till the Lord comes back, and you will not melt mild steel. It won't happen. And when I use the term mild steel, I'm not exactly sure of the structure of the building, what kind of steel, if it had been, a lot of different types of steel, how it might have been treated or what have you. But that's the bottom line. That bothers me. That bothers me. That bothers me. I have a problem with that. That tells me there's something going on here, especially since we have all these architects and engineers. These are men who know what they're talking about. They say you have been lied to. Steel structures don't collapse that way unless it is controlled demolition. With controlled demolition, you put explosives at certain points and bring it down. You've all seen the buildings come straight down. That's exactly what you saw in New York City, which of course begins to raise red flag. Number two, there are traces of explosive material have been found on the site. Yes. Number three, people witnessed molten metal flowing from the building. They want to say that it was aluminum. Aluminum, I think, melts at something like 900,000 degrees, 1,200, somewhere in there. Far, not near as hot as steel. But from the witness and testimony, this was steel flowing, molten steel flowing from the building. Number four, firemen and other witnesses heard explosions. I've listened to the recording of explosions. I would believe a New York City fireman in a heartbeat over any politician in this country. Believe me. I would believe that fireman in a heartbeat or the policemen up there, because they lost policemen and they lost firemen when these two buildings collapsed in New York City. And I can't get it out of my mind, the thought that these firemen were called to that scene and they raced into those buildings and they went up the floors totally unaware of the impending doom. That whoever did this knew that these firemen would come rushing into that building, courageous, courage. That's courage. They would be rushing into this building to go up there and try to save somebody, and yet they were heading to their own doom. And whoever dropped these buildings knew that. I call that first-degree murder. Number 5. Now listen carefully to this. Building 7. Building 7. How many of you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Building 7? It was, 40-story, 50-story, something like that. Sitting, I think it was not right on the spot, obviously. I mean, when I say on the spot, right bearing hard against it. But I forget exactly how far away it was. But it had some fires in it, all right? But all of a sudden, Building 7 collapses within itself, just like any controlled demolition. Now, I think it was CNN, BBC, some of the news media, started reporting the collapse of that building before it ever collapsed. Now, here's the thing. It begs the question. If that was a controlled demolition, which obviously it was, then it means that whoever did that knew those towers was coming down. That tells you there's a conspiracy going on. They knew the towers were coming down. They didn't know how many people would be in there. Nobody'd know that. But I don't know exactly the figure. They just call their names off, as they always do every year. And they show the family members and all with the photographs. And it's such a sad thing to people to still cry and they hurt over their lost loved ones. And a lot of the people over there in New York and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon, places like that, you know, they're enraged because they know there's something going on here. They know there's a conspiracy and that somebody murdered their loved ones. They know that. They know that. But that Building 7 went down. And when it went down, of course, the news media said, well, you know, it was the fires inside. And you can look at some of the photographs and the pictures and the videos of the thing, and you see maybe a little paper fire over here or some little fire there. That's not going to drop a steel structured building. They must think that you're a moron. They really do. They think we're morons. They think we're stupid. And so this it begs the question that why did they do it? Now, I looked at this and I thought, I don't know who did that. I know this. Whoever did it's a mass murderer. I know this. I know if you'll kill 70 million babies, little innocent children, 70 million. 70 million little babies. I was thinking last night about that. Now, God has never given it to me that way before. And I was laying there in bed and I was thinking, boy, I wonder what they look like. I wonder what 70 million adults in their 20s and their 30s, mothers and fathers and with their children, their life was taken away from them. Who has that kind of authority? Does America have that kind of authority? I don't want to be in their hand. I don't want to be in their shoes when they stand before Almighty God. I don't want to be in their shoes. They got blood on their hands. And this thing up here, this Hillary Clinton, that fully supports Planned Parenthood and the selling of baby parts, she is a supporter of baby killing. Remember that now. When you go to the polls and go into the booth, and if you have an instinct to vote for Hillary Clinton, remember that. She's a baby killer. And find out who else is, whether Democrat or Republican. And find out which one, what they believe about killing babies. But anyway, 70 million of them are dead. 70 million little children gone. Some of the black pastors are waking up. One black pastor has a website called Black Genocide, And they're beginning to wake up and understand they're killing off their people.
Yeah.
That 70%, 7 out of 10 of all abortion clinics run by Planned Parenthood are in black neighborhoods.
Right.
What's that tell you? What I've told you before about the elite and about the race, the racist structure of the elite and all that, and that's as real as you better believe it's real. But anyway, what came out of this? Because this is where it ties in with what I'm talking about with the New World Order. Number one, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act. That came out of it. Now, I haven't read the Patriot Act. Has anyone in here read it? But I have been informed that the Patriot Act took away so many of your cherished freedoms as an American that even if you are accused of being a terrorist, that they can send a drone out and kill you without a court date or an appearance before a judge or a magistrate, that they can assassinate you and take you from the face of the earth for the protection of the country, of course, for your freedoms. Of course, what's happening is that it's giving the government of Jefferson and the government of Adams and the government of George Washington, our founding fathers, it's giving that government that they never dreamed for a day in their life would ever exist, the authority to just go out and kill indiscriminately whoever they pleased. The second thing that came out of that is what's happened in Iraq, and I told you about that. What's going on over there right now is genocide. It's not genocide so much in the sense that's what the Muslims did to the Armenians at the end of the end of the 1800s, when they rose up against them. That was genocide because they were wiping out a race, a group of people. But what's going on over there is I don't know what term you'd use for it. They're wiping out a religious group of people. They're wiping them from the face of the earth. They're killing them. And they're showing you their hand. These Muslim murderers, and a woman wrote into me one time and said, "Man, that was a hateful statement." What's hateful about that? And why is everybody so sensitive to hate anymore? Let me just drop this in while I'm talking about this, okay? When the Sodomites march around, they've got a big plaque that says love. It's all about love. All right? That's love as they define it right now. You understand that? When the man comes along and says, "I want 7 wives, I love all of them," then that's love too. And when another one follows along and says, "I like animals," that's love too. You know, if it's just a matter of love, then you can define it any way you please. That's what's going on today, you understand? And if you don't agree with them, they demonize you immediately and they call it hate speech. And this is the part that comes into the church. Because once they get hate speech nailed down in this country, that if a preacher gets up and says anything, if he's preaching the Bible and says something about sodomy in preaching the Scripture, then he gets charged with hate speech and they haul him off to jail. Is that the kind of America you want to live in? You talk about an anti-American crowd. It's that bunch right there. A lot of things are said in America that I don't agree with and don't like. But because it's America, they've got a right to say it. I believe in freedom of speech. I firmly believe in freedom of speech. They don't. These people use terms like tolerance, inclusive, terms like that to show you that they've got this soft side, this gracious side to them, and they want a culture where people just love each other and there's no hate and all of that, and it's such lovey-dovey, and it doesn't exist and never will exist. These people will kill you. I keep saying that to you, and I want you to understand that. How many's ever heard of Nancy Schaefer? Most of you haven't. Nancy Schaefer was a state senator from Georgia. All right? There are those who believe that what happened in 2001 in New York City was a sacrifice to Satan. They believe it was. They believe it was a human sacrifice to Moloch. Now, we know who Moloch was. Well, they put the babies in his arms and rolled down inside this huge belly, and the little children burned, and they beat the drums to cover up the screaming of the little babies as they rolled off into the belly of this huge monster. And this is when Israel was at the behest of Solomon, who opened the door to it. Remember that about Solomon. Solomon is the one who brought that into Israel. And these little babies are dying, and they beat the drums to cover up the sound of the screaming of the little children, because Moloch demands child sacrifice. We've already seen the child sacrifice in the murder of 70 million children. Is that not child sacrifice? Certainly it is. That's innocent blood. The Old Testament says these 6 things that the Lord hate, yea, 7 are abomination to him. And one of them is hands that shed innocent blood. That shed innocent blood. So there are those who believe that by offering a sacrifice unto Satan that they can gain power. Now I believe this, that there is an elite of the elite who are running this world. And I believe that there are echelons of power and authority underneath that. And I believe that as the echelon descends underneath the top of it, of the elite, that it gets bigger. And the further down it goes, the bigger it is, but the less they know. And so you've got to climb in that pyramid and get to the very top to really understand who's running this world. And that's what's going on. And they believe in child sacrifice. Well, anyway, Nancy Schaefer was a state senator from Georgia. She was a fine, decent Christian lady. You go home and you can Google her name, and you'll pull it up, and you'll find out that she was one precious, sweet Christian lady. And that once she became a state senator in Georgia, people started coming to her. She started investigating child trafficking. Now, we've got people in our church here who are foster parents, so I'll give you this disclaimer at the very beginning. We've got good people in our church who love the Lord, who are taking little children in because they love them, they want to give them a home, and they are foster parents. There's nothing wrong with being a foster parent. I've got to say stuff like that because sometimes people, they just jump on something and take off with it. This is not about that. This is about a system, though. Child Protective Services is a system. It's throughout the country in all the states. It deals with families and the breakup of families and what happens to the children of those families and the other agencies involved and the other people involved and the money that's involved and the shady side of what's going on and how that these little children come up missing sometimes. They get into the system and they get moved around through the system and they come up missing. And what's happening is that little children wind up in the sex traffic in America. Now somebody said, "Oh, what are you talking about, preacher? There ain't any sex traffic in America." Over here in Virginia, Congressman Wolf, this is a congressman from the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, says he admits to the existence of child trafficking in Fairfax County, Virginia. And this is dated June 6, 2014. Now, the reason I mention that is because these little children, many of them are taken to be offered as human sacrifice in satanic rituals of child satanic ritual abuse. That's a mouthful. Yes, ma'am. In Florida. At a Target. As far as I'm concerned, there is nothing on this earth, that would bring more grief into my soul than to lose my child and not know where it is. Nothing. Nothing would even come close to that. To go to bed at night and not have any idea what's happening to my son or my daughter, that would be the most horrendous thing that could happen to a human being, as far as I'm concerned, in this life on this earth. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing would even come close to that. You don't know what's happening to them. You don't know if they're dead or alive. You don't know if they're being tortured. You don't know what. You don't know. You don't know. And all these things go through your mind. Yes, sir.
There's a FBI agent, he's dead, but he left 5 videos on the internet confessing what they didn't tell the public.
Gunderson.
Ted Gunderson.
Ted Gunderson.
And you listen to this stuff, and it'll really grieve you, and really it'll wake you up to find out what this world's all about.
But so you see, being an FBI agent or in law enforcement, well, he has a first-hand exposure to this stuff. He knows he sees it. He knows what's going on.
These children that disappeared, that never showed up anywhere, and no one ever heard from them again. He kind of lets you know what happened to them.
You know, that's hard for the human mind to wrap itself around, that what they could do to a child, but they do. They do. Now, of course, you know, you say, well, we were talking about the elite. Well, it goes all the way up. I mean, if the lower echelons will do that, what do you think that crowd will do up there? By offering innocent blood to Satan as a human sacrifice, they get power. They come into a league. They come into a covenant with the devil. You say, preacher, do smart people do? Yes, they do that. Absolutely they do that. There's no question in my mind that they do that. And it could be that the 9/11 was a human sacrifice to set in motion the last events, the events that lead up to the one world government and the revelation of the Antichrist. Could very well be that. I'm not saying it is, but it sure does fit the bill. It's because, I mean, what? Here, ask yourself this question this morning. Why in the world would anybody in this nation have anything to do with the killing of 3,000? As far as they were concerned, it could have been 30,000. 3,000 people. That's mass murder. And it was broadcast on television for the whole country to see. Mass murder. Why would they have anything to do with that? And there may be some of you in this house this morning who say, well, now I believe the government story on it, and that it was all a product of these Saudi Arabians who came over here, who were declaring jihad against America, and Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda and all that. This is what they were doing, and this is why they did it. I'm not saying they didn't do that. I'm not saying they didn't fly those jets into the buildings. I'm not saying that these Muslims weren't part of an organized jihad against America. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that that's not what brought those buildings down. If you get that part, if you can get that part in your soul, that there's two different things going on here. There's no question about the jets flying into the buildings, although there's a bunch out there who say it wasn't a real jet, it was a cruise missile or something. I'm not going to get off into all that. There is literally watched those jets fly into those World Trade Towers. That did not bring those towers down. If it did not bring those towers down, that screams to high heaven, who did? And then the next question is, why did they do that? And somebody said so they could start a war in Iraq. Well, they had a war in Iraq, but there's more going on than that. Because when they pulled the troops out of Iraq, and who did that? Obama. Bush sent them in, Obama pulled them out. You got all these generals over there. These are professional military men. They're not politicians, they're military men. They know what happens if you don't protect a place, if you don't have a government in place. They know they know what to expect. They know the forces arrayed against them. They know the power structure. They know the pockets of resistance. They know all of that. The logistics of the thing, they know that. Surely you know that before Obama pulled all those troops out of Iraq, he was told by those generals, now look, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And you know what? It happened. It happened. And for whatever political reason Obama might have had to do all that, the bottom line is the reality of the thing, the pragmatist view of it is simply this. When they pulled them out, the government collapsed. When it collapsed, it created a power vacuum, and ISIS moved in, And nobody ever heard of ISIS. It was all Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda. Then ISIS comes in, and some of the worst atrocities that I have ever witnessed in my life. I've lived a while, and I've never seen such vicious murders that these monsters are perpetrating on the civilian populace. They're monsters. What kind of a monster religion that they're in? They're monsters. These are savages. And they go into these old places like Palmyra over there. And Palmyra is an old archaeological site, buildings that date back thousands of years. A lot of it has to do with pagan religion and all that. But I like history and geography and stuff like that. That's the heritage of humanity. You can still learn a lot of things by looking at that. And these monsters go in there and they start blowing that stuff up. And it cannot be replaced. They are monsters. They are savages against society. Yes, sir.
Pastor, isn't it marvelous the way that the enthusiastic volunteers from America that went over there and joined the ranks of the ISIS organization, they really took them a lot of extra training to become as violent as the others.
You wonder about that, don't you? Well, I know one thing. If they go over there, they should never come back here. Right.
You said that, sir, because of how easily American terrorists can become like the rest.
Think about it. I mean, they're not ignorant of all the atrocities that these people are perpetrating, yet they want to go over there and be part of that.
Right.
What does that say about the human soul? And a lot of these people are going over there aren't necessarily Muslims. They just want to be part of what's happening. They just want to kill. They want to kill. We've always had mercenaries, folks. A mercenary is a hired soldier. That's what he is. He comes in from a foreign country and he fights for you, not for your cause. He fights for money. A mercenary. We got these people over here that are going over there. They're not even being paid. They're just going over there for the blood. What's that tell you about America? Well, here's the bottom line. This is what I gave all this to you this morning for. There's an awful lot of people that believe the month of September, we're almost in the middle of it now, there's something big is going to happen in this month. I've given you this caveat that there may something big may happen in September, but it may not happen in September. We don't know. As far as the Lord coming back concerned, I would he'd come back right now. I would that he'd come back right now. But be very careful. Be very careful that you don't get caught up in some kind of a movement that starts setting dates for the second coming of Christ. You get in trouble, folks. You're going to get in big trouble. You're going to get let down, and it's not going to do anything for your faith. We don't know when the Lord's coming back. September may pass on and nothing happen. Yes, ma'am. Yes, the 5 pillars of Islam. And they're teaching it. I'm not sure under what guise of what is, whatever they titled it, what kind of class structure it is. Certainly it's not about religion. I'm sure they approach it from a different perspective. Well, here's the thing. If they're going to do a thing on Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam, then you could demand, well, why don't you do a thing on Christianity then? The pillars of Christianity. I mean, had just as much right for one as the other. You know why? The two sources in this country that are destroying this nation comes through the educational system and it comes through the news media. It's there that they take the kids and the educational and brainwash them, and it's the news media that controls and spoon feeds what you get and puts their spin on it. Yes, ma'am. are so right. But anyway, go ahead.
They were saying, well, instead of taking the tree down, they could have just allowed other religions to put stuff out in this public space.
Well, Hanukkah, for example, the Feast of Lights comes right out about the same time, Jewish.
So it's like it's a tree.
Yeah. If they're going to give you the foundations of Islam, they need to give you the foundation of Christianity, and then Judaism, and then Buddha, and then Hindu, and on and on and on it goes. Either all or none, right? But they're hypocrites. They're lying hypocrites. And I think people are finally getting a hold of that fact. They're lying hypocrites.
Harry Reid said that Christianity's had its chance, now let's give Islam their chance.
Did he really say that?
Yeah, he did.
Well, I'd load him up and take him to Beirut over there. Take him over to Damascus and let him out and see what kind of a chance he gets.
We've been at war with Islam since...
Oh, brother, have we ever? You better believe it. You better believe it. 1683 in the gates of Vienna. If they hadn't, if the king of Poland had not come in there and gotten up on top of a mountain and fired his cannon down on top of those troops from Mustafa, I forget his name, from the Ottoman Empire, they would have overrun Vienna. Had they overrun Vienna, they would have overrun Europe. If they had overrun Europe, everything would be different today. They stopped them. Shores of Tripoli.
We've been at war with them forever.
Jefferson dealt with those Muslim pirates over there.
We're giving in to them. We're surrendering.
He sure did. It's been going on for a long time. Those Marines got on board that ship when they were fighting Tripoli. They put a big leather thing around their neck because they didn't want their throat cut. And so they'd fight those Muslims at Tripoli. And later they got the term leatherneck. That's where it came from, wearing those leather collars. Yes, sir.
Preacher, didn't Albert White say that they were going to use the Muslims to bring in World War III?
He might have. He certainly talked about World War III.
But right now, you got Russia, you got Iran sending troops to Libya, and you got everything ready for Gog and Magog.
Yes, sir, you do, brother. I mean, we're right at the point. We're right at the precipice of it all. We're right there. We are right there. And I'm watching now what this crowd is getting ready to do. The Pope's going to speak to the UN. He's going to speak to the Congress. They're going to implement this 2030 Agenda 21 on steroids. All this is coming, and it's going to be here right at your door before you know it. Yes, sir.
After knowing all this, we as a church, why are we not on our knees more praying for the lost, our neighbors, our friends, our families, co-workers? We know this now. We have heard it. How are we going to respond, and how are we going to stand before God?
I agree with that, brother. What we need to do is what Jude said. Jude said, making a difference on some, pulling them out of the fire. It gets to the point, and we're at that point, I think, where it is no longer mass evangelization. That's for the tribulation period. We're at the point now where there's just a few here and a few there, here and there, here and there, that are going to get saved. The body of Christ is just about finished. It's just about made up, and it's so foreign from the church today. Well, let's have a word of prayer and we'll let you go. We'll meet here in a few minutes and start the service this morning. Brother Crane, will you dismiss us, please?